there's no political. There's not. This is not a political thing, man. This is a can do good on every front that globally humanity is facing: water, fertilizer, diminished soil and crop productions, deforestation, carbon dioxide emissions. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, at what point in time has it become a miracle product, right?
Hello and welcome to the Regenerative Design Podcast. I'm your host, Mathieu Mehuys, and in this show, I interview the leading authorities in the world of regenerative practices, people who do good and do well. Are you a person that cares about your environment and our planet? Are you a person that wants to leave the planet to our children to be something that we can be truly proud of? Something to enjoy for many generations to come. But are you also a person that believes we can do all of this and do good in business? Well, I have really good news for you. You're here listening to the podcast that is all about making our planet a better place and making your business more successful. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Regenerative Design Podcast. And today yet we have another amazing guest. His name is Bill Wyatt. Bill Wyatt is the founder and CEO of Red Mountain Biochar. So his company is growing fast and it's becoming a global company in helping people to set up biochar installations. So we'll go deep into what biochar is, how people can use it, and what the huge benefits are for our environment. And so I'm very excited about it. Bill, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great today, Matthew. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Nice. So we already talked about it offline, but I'd love to go back to your backstory. So you have 150 years of history in the lumber industry.
Yeah.
That is where everything started. Tell me the whole story. It's very exciting.
I'm a third generation lumberman in the south of the United States and specifically in southern Illinois. And as such, you start out like everybody in the sawmills as a young boy, and you don't have the most glamorous jobs. And mine's centered around three tools: a broom, a shovel, and a banding tool for fixing units of material. And you grow up hating chips and sawdust, and the evolution. Here I am. I'm a director of manufacturing for one of the largest producers in all of North America, and I travel the South about 100,000 miles a year, and I see all the mills and all the biomass issues. And then one night, I don't know the reason why, but I'm watching Dirty Jobs, and Mike Rowe, here's a shout out to you. I see biochar on there, and immediately I think it's a solution to my industry, taking a waste to value finally. And then I see the benefits of biochar as a product, and its various uses and benefits. And agriculturally, I have that background, so I kind of explore the opportunity of, and that has now kind of expanded our reach beyond anything we ever kind of saw. We literally have opportunities not just here in the United States. We just signed an LOI on a big project in Tanzania, working on several projects in India. All of these are agricultural-based products where we are taking a waste product, the organic biomass, the crop yields, and we're turning it to biochar and putting it back into the ground for agricultural use and all the benefits of it. So kind of a crazy journey, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you're coming from this industry that might not have the most environmental friendly perspective, even though I'm a strong believer that wood is what can be, depending on how it's produced, can be one of the most sustainable building materials on the planet because it's regenerative, it keeps growing back. So I think that's interesting that you came from that industry and you saw a huge problem. Can you talk a bit more about the let's call it the dark side of the milling industry, or even in a global way of other green waste globally? Well, we can start with the milling. That would be interesting, and then.
So from our perspective, in my lifetime, and I've been in the lumber business 50 years, There's been a lot of evolution of change. Sustainability practices, responsible farming and forestry, responsible logging and milling operations. In my role as a director, we look to optimize everything. We don't want any waste coming out of our mills, because ultimately the waste, chips and sawdust, they've had no value. And at the scale that we make this waste, people don't really necessarily understand how much volume we're talking about. I have mills that make 25, 30,000 tons a week of waste biomass. And, when you multiply that across the South and the smaller mills and the mom and pop mills, it's a real problem getting rid of this material and having any value. Most of them, when they do find an outlet for it, if they're not piling up on their facilities, they're not offered any value, none whatsoever. So, from a value to the mills to create a value, and then ultimately, the real value is in the benefits of the product. I mean, I can't tell you, in every industry that we're involved in, whether it's the cashew nut industry or the cotton industry or the pulp and paper industry or the forestry sector, which I'm from the sawmill side of it, it's a repetitive theme that, your core products generate residuals. And in the biomass industry of agricultural,
what do you mean by residuals? Just to
the waste of what you do. You harvest the product and you get you get what you're harvesting, but you get what it took to grow or make that
residues. Yeah, got it.
So if you look at that from a perspective of what we do, the technology is not that new. Its application is being more widely applied, and then the benefits of it are coming to fruition. But on the basis of everything on the earth is carbon based. Essentially we could pyrolyze everything and turn it back to carbon, which is essentially do. And it's that carbon what gives the benefit both to soil and agricultural benefits, the environment from sequestering CO2, various applications in construction and steel and asphalt. It's a versatile product with numerous applications, and in every application, there's core benefit to the products being applied to, and then the overarching kind of benefit is the benefit to the environment. It's only one of two negative sequestering products. You have mechanical, which is direct air capture. And you have this, which is a more natural, event, which you're taking carbon and putting it back into agriculture or into other industrial uses. So there's two ways to approach negativity. Actually, ironically, as much as we're separate kind of technologies, we recently were approached by a DAC company to combine our product as a sorption in DAC technology. So that's kind of exciting to be able to take two separate technologies in the same arena and maybe combine it, get a superpower out of it, so to speak.
I want to go a bit into the details of it, because we talked about it before in our first conversation. Like, just give the listeners here some examples. I know you're starting to have some evidence that we could reduce the concrete industry by just mixing it into the cement. So when we build houses, it would even make concrete more solid. And if we look at concrete as one of the, like, if we look at the greenhouse gases and what industries have the biggest impact on our environment, concrete and glass and building industry in general has a huge impact. So give me the stats on what the percentages are if we mix it into that industry.
Well, if you look at the application in concrete, of course, the percentages are still evolving because, as a matter of fact, we're working with a company that is working under a grant with the federal government from 25 to 27 to incorporate the standards into cement, ready mix, and to precast. So writing the standards for the ASTM. We're actively involved in that because as many sites as we have up and coming, one of their challenges is they need as much data logging so they can go through the kind of the verification of the product, the process, and then the application. So we're enjoined in those studies. We have different percentages based on what the applications are. So, in structural applications,
potential could be.
we have non-structural applications, precast, and then things like your blocks that you buy at Home Depot, decorative blocks and things like that, non-structural applications. So you can put much higher percentages in non-structural applications and still regain structural integrity. Wow. But it reduces the amount of water you need to put in concrete when you're making it. It provides, or I should say, changes concrete to a carbon neutral product in its application. So it helps it dry faster. It gives it more durability. There's a lot of just base characteristics, without being able to kind of specify what the percentages of mix are per se. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's like in agricultural use. There's various recommendations on agricultural use, but there's certain considerations that you have to take in, like pH and things of that nature.
Sure.
And then what are the base nutrient requirements? Because
you say that it can make concrete carbon neutral in its production process.
Yes,
that's huge.
There's two ways we can look at that. So you can make biochar, which is our predominant item, but the lesser is biocoal. So we're also in a joint venture with a company coming from Argentina to produce biocoal for them. So
as a heating, and that's mostly for heating.
Yes, that's for all their kilns, so that it gives them carbon neutrality on that as well. So you make it neutral to process the product, and then neutral in terms of when you apply it in the concrete it's considered a synthetic aggregate in the concrete. So it has aggregate properties per se. But what it actually does, if you look at the properties of biochar, it's carbon, pure carbon, and if you look into it, it's the surface area that it has. It has enormous surface area.
Oh yeah.
So its ability to pull in and calcify carbon dioxide and/or negate any carbon dioxide emissions. That's its core function. That's its core performance value. So
that's why it's also very exciting in farming, right? It can help to retain the nutrients in the soil, whereas we're having a lot of erosion and loss of nutrients.
Farming for us is probably the area of most promise. With approximately 38,000 acres a day of forestry being demolished across the world to make for new agriculture because we've diminished soil capacities and production capacities. If you look at the agricultural side, that's where, this product kind of really shines. Biochar, when you put it in the ground, and you apply it at the rates that are recommended, 5 tons per acre. If you have true quality biochar, you will see a 25 to 40% reduction in watering. It retains water and disperses it more evenly. So through the drought period, you're kind of protecting yourself with kind of a dosing of water, or at least a fixed amount that it releases. And at the same time, when you look at the other side of it, you get 40 to 60% increase in crop yields. But then you look at soil benefits. It decreases
40 to 6. We have to take a minute to 40 to 60% increase in yields. That's massive.
So you save water, which is a critical issue for the globe. You increase food production, which is another critical issue for the globe.
Yep.
And then you look at the first statement of 38,000 acres a day. I'm from the forestry industry. That's devastating to us. That's non-replenishable forestry going to agriculture, okay? So when you have the opportunity...
What do you mean by that? That it's devastating?
I mean, they take out 38,000 acres a day globally. That's kind of you can Google it.
Yes.
And they're taking it out because they need it for agricultural use, because the existing farmland used to grow is diminished in its capacity to produce.
Yes. And that's because of industrial farming,
They just had a huge flood in Spain. And you know why
crazy.
you see all the mud and all of the things that they have? Because their soil is so diminished it couldn't hold together. No. That's all they need. The biochar is the environmental glue of the soil. It holds water, it retains fertilizers just like water and kind of disperses them. It reduces compaction. It reduces erosion. It gives the microbiological activity kind of a super motel to exist and thrive. So and then if you reapply it every 5 years, as is recommended, you continue to kind of condition the soil and really bring the soil back to a healthy environment. So you wouldn't have to diminish trees. You would reduce the amount of water you need. You would increase your crop yields. There was a study that came out on golf courses, of all things, municipal golf courses. Application of biochar to these golf courses reduced their water consumption in such a manner that their ROI was 1 year, because they literally spend tens of thousands of dollars a month on watering.
And that's then also linked because golf courses tend to be chemically, they need to spray them a lot to keep them like neat, which is another discussion in and of its own. But only using biochar will drastically reduce that, because you'll have grass on the
and you have healthier grass.
Grass, so at least there will be a huge reduction in chemical need for the grass. Same with agriculture. If your plants are yielding at 60 to 80% more, that means you can reduce heavily in pesticides, herbicides, nitrogen, chemically, synthetic nitrogen, and all this.
So one of the asides, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but you hit on something else. Fertilizer and chemical fertilizers in particular. So part of
nitrogen.
Part of our process, we have the opportunity to pull out the oils that come as an extraction, just like the synthetic gases.
Oh yeah.
The oils are processed back as essentially a biopesticide, so a natural inoculant for the plants. When you look at this kind of the symbiosis of the plant's biomass or organic plant biomass creating healthier environments for reapplication back into its environment, so to speak. You're just repurposing biomass kind of more expediently than nature's doing it. Nature does it naturally through the decay process. It's not necessarily as efficient and have the same carbon negation properties, but it goes through the same process ultimately.
With biochar, you're just speeding it up.
Yeah,
I think.
We're just trying to come up with a kind of consistent methodology of processing it and quality control and everything from the feedstock we put in to ways we process at time and temperature and the various methodologies of controlling oxygen content per se. And ultimately when the product comes out, it's a raw sponge, if you will. So it gives us opportunity to put natural nutrients in it, everything from animal manures that we're working on with some of the anaerobic digesters to other things like the wood vinegar that comes out. So a lot of opportunities to kind of paradigm shift the fertilizer industry, kind of help the watering needs of the globe as they continue to evolve.
Yes.
And there again, biochar as a water remediation, as a water filtration device has stellar performance. So you're literally cleaning up your soils while you're applying this. So any heavy metals or any hazardous chemicals or things that are in the soil are going to be kind of cleaned up as time goes on. So it acts as soil remediation as well.
Wow, the benefits are like endless, and they ripple out from one benefit, it ripples out into several others. It's like it becomes crazy. Like it becomes very exciting and knowing this, I don't know if the science that gave the dooms thinking of how global climate change or the climate crisis is going in the bad direction, how fast it is going. But if we can apply these systems that you're creating and selling, I think we can solve it faster than we can imagine. And just to stress one thing out onto the nitrogen, like for farmers, nitrogen is one of the highest costs in their business, especially today since the war in Ukraine. Nitrogen has skyrocketed in price. And what's also crazy about synthetic nitrogen that not everybody knows is that it's produced with oil. So there's machines that are run on diesel or whatever fuel you get. And these machines will take, because nitrogen is readily available in the atmosphere. So these machines take it out of the atmosphere while they're burning fossil fuels, so they can get a certain amount of liquid nitrogen, so then farmers can spray that on their land. And I've seen some videos. In some cases, farmers are spending as much money as they buy tractors. And I'm telling you, not everybody knows, a price of a tractor is like the price of a sports car. So some farmers are spending that amount of money a year on nitrogen, and with this we can, to start, heavily reduce it, but also we can tap into more natural processes of capturing nitrogen from the atmosphere, because as it turns out, there's plants that do it for us. We don't need sophisticated machines and burning up fossil fuel to get nitrogen out of the atmosphere. There's actual plants that do it. And that in farming, I'm very excited about cover crops. And that's where that function can come in, and it will work brilliantly with the biochar. So just wanted to stress that out, that again, like ripple effect is very, very exciting.
The crazy part is that biochar offers kind of the base, if you will, the base of opportunity of application, because there's so many things that it can serve. And when you combine various effects, I'll give you another bit of information. We were approached by a very large mining company out in the California area. They mine zeolite. And I've done
zeolite?
Zeolite.
What is that?
Zeolite's a naturally occurring chemical and has properties for remediation, and it has properties for fertilization in agriculture.
Oh, got it.
But when you combine zeolite with biochar, because again, biochar is a base, the combined properties make it the Superman of soil and water remediation, natural soil remediation. So imagine a super fun cleanup site and all of what's involved there, instead of just taking biochar and continuing to mix it till it totally absorbs this stuff over time. You know, we have enough challenges that, industry faces from being responsible, and the lumber industry is probably one of the most responsible, because, we have to grow a crop that repeats itself. And if we're not responsible stewards, our industry will die. It's not like you make new trees all the time unless you grow them, okay? So we're very, very responsible stewards of industries, of our industry. And guys like me, as a director and growing up in the industry, third generation, when I grew up, I didn't grow up on probably the most glamorous side of the industry. We were remanners, which means we took, materials and remanufacture them. So it was important for us to watch the waste streams and make sure that nothing hit the chipper that could be made into something. Huh. And that mentality stayed with me my whole life. I'm the guy that makes something out of everything, right? And so, now the opportunity to serve my industry was one thing, but now, the pivot has become the good of the product, the benefit of the product. And now even more so, some of the areas where we're offered these enormous opportunities. The opportunity to give back from a social standpoint is becoming a real priority for us. The countries that are giving us these enormous opportunities, we built an enormous social programs. Programs, I'll just give you just small things. Like in Tanzania, we're literally making a $60 million per plant CapEx on 20-something plants in this country over time. And every 10 years, we're walking away from each one of them and giving them to the local community, giving our part to them so they can continue to build hospitals and schools and roads and, improve their education systems and the opportunities. When you don't start with that agenda, but you're given that opportunity, it kind of changes maybe how you look at things. And we're getting such a huge, broad opportunity. Maybe that's why, because now we look at this as a social responsibility. There's an environmental responsibility we have. We can take a waste and make a value out of it. We can all benefit from that value. And in that, the give back should be to the areas that are in most need of it and who are giving us the most opportunity, because some areas are so in need of it and so positive in terms of moving this industry forward to make change. Mm-hmm. The ability for us to make impact isn't limited by any border. So we welcome the opportunities that are coming to us and are so amazed that some of the opportunities just continue to pour in. We have opportunities in Indonesia and South Korea right now. Every day I get more and more opportunities throughout Africa. It's almost insane how much good you can do if everybody can just work together and put everything aside and say, you know what, here's a really good way to solve a lot of issues for our countries, for our communities, for our environment, and a lot of opportunity to do real good, serious real good in the entire circularity of what that would mean, right?
This podcast is brought to you by the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass. Are you struggling with finding the right tools and tricks for your garden? Are you lacking the confidence to be a self-sufficient gardener? Do you sometimes get overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge and time you have to actually do gardening? Then the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass is for you.
I think that's amazing, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into. I have to keep in mind that towards the end of the episode, you have to tell the story with the cashew nuts in Africa, because that's mind blowing. But if we'll get to that, I first want to get a little bit more into the technical side of how your company operates and how you're setting up these, in essence, they're factories, right? So how does the process work? I'm calling you, hey Bill, I want to set up a factory here in Belgium. How does it go?
So typically, this is a repeat that we hear so often here these last few weeks. You know, they have the opportunity for us to have a footprint. They have a biomass feedstock issue, but they're needing somebody who is forward of their ability to procure the equipment, have viable equipment that can produce at scale, come into their country and make an impact by having the ability to not just show up there as a business model, but to show up to be a social model that's repeatable, that gives people the opportunity to engage and solve their problems. And at the same time, from our standpoint, like I told you before, it never really started as a social goal. I mean, that just was how it evolved. But from our standpoint now, that's kind of the driving force. And, you know, when you start listening to people's needs, and you touched on the opportunity in Tanzania, I think that spells out the same thing that we worked on with some of the projects in India, that when you come to the table with people of need and like-mindedness that want to have an impact, that you settle everything aside and you spell out what that is and who can be brought to the table, because we didn't start out with everybody just saying, here's our opportunity, come take care of it. We had to say, okay, but it's going to take these various entities and parties to be a part of it for it to be truly successful, impactful. And if the certain parties we're talking about and joining aren't a party to it, then we know that the success is probably limited. But
that's from your experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and we're gaining more of it because it's almost the same discussion in this most generic form of what the opportunity is and what, you know, when we do a little deeper dive of what the need within the need is, that's where the real, you know, kind of, I guess, relationship or the connection is made, because we're trying to find out where the true value of the relationship is. You know, processing biomass for a profit, that's you know, that's a corporate goal. Processing biomass for the good of what it can do, getting it back into application, working with the people to get it into application for their best use and benefit, and ultimately for the benefit of what the product does, the overarching, which is the carbon sequestering, right? But, you know, in areas where agriculturally you have issues with soil, which is, you know, goodness gracious, it's everywhere. I mean, to improve their ability to use their water more efficiently, or clean up their water, or clean up their soils, or produce more, you know, to feed themselves or their animals. You know, there's a lot of good that can be done. And, you know, and the whole process of how we do this, from the feedstock to the process and product, is just so crazy and amazing, because, you know, initially we fire up these machines on natural gas for a couple of hours. And then when we start moving all the product through the process, just because of its natural event of what it gives off, it essentially starts running on its own accord.
That sounds like music to my ears.
And it puts out no, you know, hazardous products. I mean, we're using clean feedstocks. We're burning off everything back into the refractories. We're able to take some excess gases and excess oils out of it for further use. I mentioned fertilizer, but you can also make biodiesel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
then I think when you do the the liquid gold that we talked about, because that's made out of the gas, right? So if you can liquefy
actually,
that,
that's out of the oil. Actually, we out of the gases we make. They make SAF and other type gases for burning. They do make it out of the oils as well, but we're looking at the oil more on the fertilizer side because we're so tight on the agricultural side application wise. So we really want the crops that we're taking these biomasses in from to give them back their natural biocide, if you will, for application on top of the as far as with the biochar. So they get, kind of all around, natural pesticide, water, fertilizer, the opportunity for the plant to truly have an opportunity to grow and have microbial success. And look, over time, the soil just gets better and better and better. So instead of diminishing and fertilizing and diminishing and fertilizing, and you're having soil degradation over time, you're actually building the health of the soil back. So
that's amazing. But just to let's say all the stars align with the stakeholders that need to be around the table, and you set up a project, what is like the timeline to get it up and running? Is it like complicated with the specific machinery that you need, or
no?
Like how fast can you set it up?
So typically the footprint that we look at is about a 6-month window to get all of the equipment, put together as installation unit ready and shipped. And then you have all the true installation on site, so site prep and what have you. But during that 6 months of waiting, you can get all your site prep done. It's actually minimal site prep. So as long as utilities are more or less available to us, we can even work around some of that with portable generators and things like that, because we give off thermal electric energy as well. So there's a lot of self-sustainability about how we operate this equipment. And, from our standpoint, we look at if we signed a deal today and we were moving, forward as of that minute, I would tell you that I would be on your footprint and operational with what we consider our top-down footprint. It's a 4-unit installation. So we initially want to get there and get set up. And that means we would consume about 160,000 tons a year of raw material. And produce somewhere in the order of about 40,000 tons of finished product for application. Application rates about 5 tons an acre, so you can kind of extrapolate how much ground cover we could make. It's a pretty effective application. One of our, I don't want to say competitors, but one of our other people in this industry, a company called Exomad. I'm really proud to know them and see their work. They continue to expand. And when you look into them, they have the same community type give back. We're involved with the people that are bringing the biomass, getting full benefit back to them at no charge. So we're building a model that is unparalleled in its ability to scale and for there to be true benefit to the people who are dealing with the biomass problems. They direct the benefit from the alleviation of the problem and then the benefit of, what the problem is turned into. So that they benefit in so many different ways. We're blessed to have this opportunity and to continue to evolve the model and learn kind of the best way to make the best, impact. And impact is a big word, right? So, if you look at it as the ESG model, environmental, social, and governance, we're trying to make sure we're good stewards on every level and maybe be that that model that everybody tries to work towards, because it really doesn't seem that difficult, to be honest with you. I'm truly amazed on how simple the whole effort truly is. If you just, maybe it is the stars aligning, I don't know, but it just seems like with truly applied effort, everybody that's involved, even on the smallest places in Kenya or Zimbabwe, there's people that are so motivated. They are making impact. And it just starts with that drive, right? I mean, if you'd have told me 1 year ago, I've been in this industry for 50 years. I'm on the backside of a contract, could choose retirement and enjoy my children and my grandchildren. I've been married 41 years, and I've built that side of my life along the way.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. But, now I can't walk away from it. What I first thought was a really cool idea to solve biomass has now become this national responsibility. I feel that, this is so simple to do. I just feel like I have to do these things.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very blessed again. I'm less than a week away from being highlighted on stage in front of 78 countries and over 1,500 people that are industry titans that I hope to make a bigger global impact of reach.
Wow.
And
where's that, and what event is it?
It's a private event in Los Angeles. And it's once a year. It's all the rich people around and famous people and captains of every industry across the planet. Jesus. Like I said, in 78 countries. And I still don't know how a little Southern third generation lumberman is going to be on stage pitching this to 78 countries and trying to gain traction so people can kind of, you know what they say, it takes a community, right, to raise a child. Well, if you look at biochar as a child, it's going to take the globe, not just the community. So the more I do things like this, and people like you are so gracious to kind of let me have some airtime and put the word out and do a little deep dive on it and challenge people to, do your deep dive on it. There's a lot of scientific evidence that backs up this product and the benefits of it. This is not big corporations trying to sell you the next fancy thing. We're not trying to sell you anything. Actually, if you look at our net business model, how it's evolving, we're just giving it to you. You know what we're making do? We're making the government and the overall industry, the carbon industry, pay for this, right? We're not engaging the people to do it. We're saying, okay, we have these initiatives, so let's all work together and quit talking about it. And we can't impose it on the people because it's too much of a burden, right? But if we make that bridge where the burden's not on the people and you're not that much of a burden on the government, you spread it kind of across the different industries that are involved. Well, then that's kind of how it's supposed to be, right? Industry should support the overarching mission. So
I agree.
It's truly different than anything I've ever been involved in. I've sold lumber my whole life. You got to buy something to sell something and make a profit. And, I've never had
It's incredible. What a beautiful story. And I think like what you touched upon, that it becomes so natural to do good for the environment, for the people, it becomes like in some cases you might think it sounds too good to be true, looking at the news and climate change and whatever politics. And that's one thing that I want to stress out. Even now that you're going to have a new president, some hopes are there that because he's teaming up with Kennedy Jr., which is going to be a great advocate for regenerative farming. So I'm excited. We'll still have to see how that turns out. But I think we never have to put our own hopes in other people. We should create the business ourselves. We can innovate. You're the perfect example of like you creating a massive business and you're doing it from the heart because you're trying to solve one minor problem with waste. You came on to see like, wow, this can actually completely change the world. And now you're gonna keep chasing it and keep doing it. You're getting on stages. It's incredible.
It's crazy. The more you do this, it just becomes more intuitive to you that the path and the direction you truly should be taking with it. And where you start and where you finish, like one of my coaches tells me, you have to be ready to pivot when it's time. And the speed of implementation is what you get from this pivot to that pivot to know that you made the right decision, or you need to pivot back to what you were doing. I can't tell you how much has changed since I started this 1 year ago. 1 year ago, I knew nothing about what I do. Nothing. I knew lumber like the back of my hand, right? And now I'm considered a foremost authority and expert and one of the most branded people in this industry. And I'm very thankful for that. I truly hope to make a big impact because I think it's an opportunity. And, your blessings are where you count them, right? And maybe sometimes late in life, you don't understand where a true passion or something can come from, but not ignoring it can probably be one of the greatest changes and challenges you've ever had. So I'm blessed.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, and your whole life was leading up to this great moment.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So, and also just to stress again, like this is what true regeneration is about. So if you look at what sustainability could be, if you look at sustainability, the word itself, it just means sustaining, kind of means keep doing the same thing. Maybe you have one problem, you solve it. That's it. Good, sustaining. But if you look at regeneration, you have a problem, you solve that problem, and by solving that problem, you also create a host of other amazing solutions, and there's a ripple effect to it. So I think it's so beautiful to hear you explain that story. So we're gonna have to start wrapping up, but still, I want the audience to know this crazy, beautiful example of cashew production in Tanzania, right?
Yeah,
tell the whole story. It's so amazing.
So we were presented with the opportunity from somebody who has been in deep discussions with the government of Tanzania, and we didn't know at the time, but I guess 5 or 6 years ago, the government took over the cashew nut industry because of, I guess, various issues within the industry. And they kind of leveled the playing field and gave, the farmers kind of a renewed opportunity to succeed, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so in doing so, they've reached out because they have a tremendous biomass issue, tremendous. So...
Yeah, just to sketch it, when you have a cashew production, it's a big fruit with a lot of flesh, and there's only like 1 or 2 nuts. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but there's very few nuts and a lot of flesh.
It's a big, looks like a big bulb, and it's got a nut growing on the bottom, and literally the nut is separated from it, and you still have to get it out of the nut husk. So and if you look at it, it's a very nasty process. The people have had to process it by hand for all eternity. And it's very acidic and it's very, very harmful to your skin. So they come to us, and then their thought was, if we could co-locate with them and take the biomass in and process it to biochar. Obviously, they knew about the benefits of biochar, and we were working out the details of that. But their overarching desire was to co-locate with us and asked if they could have our excess thermal energy. Now, we do run kind of thermal exchange generators that take some of the heat out and turn it to electricity. So we're, at least net neutral, if not net positive, on energy production or consumption. So, it was a real no-brainer, because when we're done with everything at this point in time, we have a flare stack. And we're flaring off, and we don't have any emissions. We have a patented CO2 process that takes all the CO2 out of the stack. But it's a tremendous amount of energy. So we agreed, because they had informed us that 90% of their profit potential was lost to having to dry the nuts. So we continued our discussions, and I continued to do a deep dive on my own about the whole industry, because I didn't know anything about cashew nuts. Never had to process them. They tell you anything about lumber you want to know, but not cashew. So when I looked at it, and I looked at how they separated it and the shelling process, I thought, wow, that's absolutely horrific. It has not been brought to the modern age, right? So then I went back to them and said, hey, if you're going to co-locate the roasting facility and take all our thermal energy, why don't you co-locate the shelling facility? And that way there's nothing that has to be done in the field except for bring us the nut, and then it would go to the shelling operation. We would take the bio side of it. The thermal would go to the dryers. The electric could be used however they want to either the shelling location or to the drying. We could adjust the thermodynamics on that for whatever the electrical need is. And they gave us opportunity to locate right next to their export zone at the port, literally 1,000 hectares, 1,100 hectares of land. I don't know why they think we need almost 2,500 acres, but maybe they know things we don't, maybe because the other regions might kick in, but we're taking the opportunity. We're going to have an installation. Probably, we signed the LOI like a week ago, so we're just working out details of footprint and actual site location right now. So, but what an opportunity, right? So then we decided, look, because the government's involved, and we got to give them their part, and then we need something for the capex, because it's a big capex, and we'd like to at least have some residual out of that. So we looked at the opportunity, and we know our side of the ROI and what have you, and we decided, because they said, look, if we execute at level or at scale in this region, which is 1 million tons of biochar in this one region, and literally, when we got up to speed, we literally could just start rolling out in each region throughout the other 22 regions, and just be repeat. So how much more simple can you be, right? Oh. So then we decided that, look, our social responsibility was take a percentage of the profit out, reinvest it into the local communities for that opportunity. Wow. And then, I had the longer picture that, maybe God keeps giving me these crazy ideas on how it really works. But then I just decided that after 10 years, we'd walk away from the site location and leave it to the local community. And the only thing we want out of all of what it's going to do and all the good, we just want half of the carbon credits that it's going to generate, just as kind of the thank you for that region of having done so well. And our reciprocal is, we're walking away from a $60 million investment on our part. So every facility times 60, you can do the numbers. We're walking away from a tremendous amount of assets over time. But they're going to take us into Mozambique and other areas that they share the same region of growing. So, it goes back to the opportunity to do good is so exponentially crazy that we just have to do right when we do the first installation, and then the people should take it from there, because we're using all local people. I mean, we're not trying to bring in outside people to do these things. No. So a lot of opportunity, just crazy.
I think, it's brilliant. And just to summarize it again for the listeners to understand the impact of this will have. So cashews production cost 90% is energy to dry it. This is energy that was is currently still used from the grid, probably produced, who knows by what energy source, probably coal in some cases, or just big industrial energy facilities creating it, which are not good for the environment. You're getting it completely off the grid, and you're reducing the cost of the cashew nut production by 90%, so they become 90% more profitable. Mm-hmm. On top of that, you have the cashews can be dried on site with your own produced energy. You'll have potentially you can have still more energy production from those units that you could sell to the locals, or however it's going to be used. You can sell that energy still. So I think it's brilliant in so many levels. We didn't even talk about what the product is, biochar, that you'll be able to put that back into the fields of the cashew nut. So the cashew trees will be healthier. They will have to use less chemicals in that process. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Limits there's
it's
like no limit.
Crazy. Goes back to I feel so blessed because it's just so all of it's just so crazy. So. Yes.
And I think also that it's brilliant in that sense. If we look at it, okay, we have this whole paradigm, we need more clean energy. So we've got windmills, but as now it turns out, windmills, they need huge maintenance. They only start cash flowing after, 7 years, I think, and they need maintenance after 10 years. So there's only 3 years of it being profitable. We have solar panels, seems to be okay, but what do we do with it when it doesn't work anymore? And here you got a beautiful system that is harvesting sunlight directly. There's no fossil fuels involved. And that's going to have a huge impact on our environment, because that also opens up the whole paradigm that we think that carbon is something bad. Like, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's bad. Well, it's been around forever. And if you exhale, that's also carbon dioxide. So it's a whole wrong thinking. It's the carbon cycle that's more important. Mm-hmm. And with your process, you're taking the trees, in this case, the cashew trees, are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We are absorbing them. The nuts get reproduced. The carbon is still you have the biochar, which is the carbon of that product, and it goes back into the fields, back into the soil. So you're becoming carbon negative in a very fast way while you're doing something, while you're having a production process. So it's not like I think with governments, it's always like, okay, you have to do this, you have to do that, and it becomes a burden where this is pure opportunity. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. Very, very exciting. So
Me too.
Bill,
Me too.
we have to be respectful of your time.
Okay.
So anything that you still want to share with the audience, how can people best reach out to you? Through your website, social media, LinkedIn?
Yeah, reach out to my website, redmountainbiochar.com. Obviously, you can reach me through LinkedIn. Just reach out to me. That's all I ask. If you are one of the people in the audience that could be one of those game changers that, has an application or a use in your production or your products, reach out to me. There's a lot of people kicking the can down the road on the reasons not to use it. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, there's more of an overwhelming majority, and we can feel the kind of the shift of people who are using it and do see the benefits and, the well-rounded application of it. It's not just a one and done use, So, this is something that there's huge benefit and huge sustainability aspects to. So, you're right. It could be very huge, but it's going to take all of us and a community of people to educate and apply it and kind of to see those benefits and then kind of lean into, what it does for everybody. I mean, this is not a political thing, man. This is can do good on every front that globally humanity is facing. Water, fertilizer, diminished soil and crop productions, deforestation, carbon dioxide emissions. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, at what point in time has it become a miracle product, right? But we're just grateful. We're grateful and very thankful for this. And that's what I want to express is, if people could have that same mindset and see the opportunity for what it is and have that really thankful, grateful opportunity to make an impact, step up to the plate and do so. That's all.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. On that beautiful note, we're going to end the show. I hope to get you back onto the show sometime to get updates.
You bet.
So thank you very much for coming on.
Matthew, have a great day. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the audience for taking the time to listen.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.